Next, I will show you why this information is so detrimental and important to the people concerning our well-being, our freedom, and our rights, and expose the lies that we have all been told for a better understanding. And the process of healing to begin. Here is what the victim is currently alleging. Case 120-CV-07102-LLS, filed 08/31/20, page 1 of 13, United States, Southern District, District Court, New York. Let's see. Plaintiff Charlene Y. Latham. Plaintiff 1, David G. Latham. Plaintiff 2, Tracy Y. Latham. Plaintiff 3, John Doe, 1 through 10. Charlene Y. Latham. Plaintiff 1, David G. Latham. Plaintiff 2, Tracy Y. Latham. Plaintiff 3, John Doe, 1 through 10. Jane Doe, 1 through 5. Defendants: 1. The 1953 Trust, defendant. 2. Harvey Weinstein, defendant. 3. Sean Carter, defendant. 4. Darren Indike. 5. Richard Kahn. 6. The Weinstein Corporation. 7. Miramax LLC. 8. The Walt Disney Company. 9. Def Jam Recordings. 10. Rock Nation. 11. Universal Music Group. 12. Beyonce G. Knowles. 13. Kanye O. West. 14. Terrence Thornton. 15. Black Cube Ltd. 16. Vivendi S.A. 17. Dwayne Carter. 18. John Luke Brunel. 19. Young Money Entertainment. 20. GOOD Music. 21. Shelley Massenberg Smith. 22. David Boyes. 23. Robert Kelly. 24. Milton Brown. 25. Marcelo Clower. 26. Sprint Corporation. 27. Viacom CBS. 28. Vigil Abloh. 29. Qatar Investments Authority. 30. Tudor Saliba Corporation. 31. Ghislaine Maxwell. 32. Parkwood Entertainment. 33. The City of New York. 34. Sir Philip Green. 35. Sony Entertainment. 36. John Doe's 1 through 100. 37. Jane Doe's 1 through 100. 38. Corporation Doe's 1 through 100. Page 2 of 13. Plaintiff number 1 enters this statement as formal statement of this case against all defendants as captioned in page 1 of this statement. The Doe defenders, including corporations and their executive or involved personnel, are fully included in this action. The Doe defendants represent employees, partners, collaborators, vendors, third parties, heirs, and related entities whose identities and specific criminal roles have been intentionally concealed or withheld by the defendant to prevent their being brought to justice by being named in this and other civil complaints while intentionally being made unavailable to the plaintiff of this action to avoid redress. corporate defendants, named or identified as does, are accused of aiding and abetting in the facilitation of the unlawful surveillance, spying, stalking, and repeated drugging, abducting, hostage-taking, and kidnapping for the criminal intent of sexual assault, abuse, extortion, and exploitation in the same capacity as any person named as defendant, and in their capacity as corporations providing support to the criminal enterprise of the defendants 1 through 3, as corporate purveyors, facilitators, conspirators, and including by providing money laundering services to route payments to the parties of this large-scale criminal enterprise of criminal activity targeting the plaintiffs. Some Doe defendants' identities are not revealed at the time of filing this statement to protect or preserve any criminal investigation occurring that may be jeopardized or undermined if the plaintiff reveals certain Doe defendants' identities at this stage of the proceedings. Over the course of decades, the defendants established a lucrative but sociopathic criminal enterprise where the defendants engaged in decades of human trafficking, sexual assaults, and various abuses, including financial and economic exploitation, drugging for abduction, taking plaintiffs number 1 and plaintiffs John and Jane Doe 1 through 10 hostage, etc. Page 3 of 13. The defendants engaged in this criminal and sociopathic conduct as a form of specific criminal intentions designed to sexual harassment, extortion, physical torture, psychological torment, and revenge, targeting plaintiff number 3 for her refusal to sell her child, plaintiff number 1, or children, John Doe and John Dane, plaintiffs, to the defendants 1 through 3. When plaintiff number 3 refused to sell or allow the defendants in any capacity to sexually abuse or financially exploit plaintiffs number 1 or any of her other children and grandchildren, represented as John and Jane Doe plaintiffs 1 through 10, at any time, the defendants began targeting the family for economic abuses and financial exploitation that not only consisted of drugging their children and plaintiffs 2 and 3 for sex trafficking, hostage taking, and related abuse, but also began exploiting the plaintiff for theft of trade secrets, intellectual property, and torturous interference in the plaintiff's career and economic opportunities. This extensive scheme of the defendants was initiated by Jeffrey Epstein, the descendant represented through this action by his estate, the 1953 trust, as revenge against plaintiff number 3. Plaintiff number 3 agreed to out-of-court multi-million-dollar monetary settlement in the late 1980s, early 1990s to avoid a public criminal and civil prosecution of Epstein's sexual abuse of several of the plaintiffs' 2 and 3's children. Plaintiffs 2 and 3 share 6 children together, 3 sons, $3, and approximately 14 grandchildren. After misappropriating Leslie Wexner's money to pay the settlement, Jeffrey Epstein devised a scheme of revenge and recovery of the money by targeting the plaintiff for drugging and trafficking the children, for continued abuse, and his various orgies around the world, where he was paid large sums by elite attendees of the salacious events, and then used the money from abusing the plaintiffs to repay his debt to Wexner. The decades of abuse and sexual assaults were equally to the benefit, entertainment, and economic enrichment of the corporations, as well as facilitated in whatever capacities by the corporations, their managers, and personnel, as by any person named as defendant. Page 4 of 13. This action in the U.S. Southern District Court of New York, because it is where the defendant's conspiracies to traffic and exploit for criminal sexual intent targeting plaintiff number 1 occurred when she was a minor child belonging to and in the custody of plaintiffs 2 and 3. Over the course of 30 years, since at least 1988 or 1989, the defendants did conspire to unlawfully surveil, drug, and abduct for sexual, sex trafficking, and other exploitative abuses plaintiff number 1 around the world, specifically throughout the Southern District of New York. This action is entered into the U.S. Southern District Court of New York as it is one jurisdiction in which the defendants abducted plaintiff number 1 at approximately age 13 to sexually assault and exploit sexually for financial gain. The defendants, Harvey Weinstein, Shine Carter, and Jeffrey Epstein, Represented in this action as defendant number 1, the 1953 trust, conspired together and with the other defendants to illegally transact a purchase agreement, giving them ownership of plaintiff number 1, while she was a minor child residing in the state of Illinois at approximately age 5 or 6 years old in the custody of her parents, plaintiff number 2 and 3, with the intent of committing criminal sex acts against the plaintiff as a child and throughout the course of her entire adult life. The defendants 1, 2, and 3 at no time communicated with nor permission from plaintiffs number 2 and 3, the biological and custodial parents of plaintiff 1, to purchase plaintiff number 1 or otherwise take possession of her at any time as a minor child. Over the course of at least 30 years and longer, the defendants conspired to surveil and stalk plaintiff number 1 and 3 in order to track the female plaintiff with the intent to commit various sex acts, etc. against them. The defendants 1, 2, and 3 conspired with the various parties and corporations named as defendants to stalk the plaintiff in order to drug, abduct, and traffic the plaintiff number 1 to various events known as sex parties, hosted by the now deceased Jeffrey Epstein, represented as defendant number 1, around the world for abuse by elite, high-profile, wealthy purveyors held at all of the defendants number 1 properties, including in the United States and Virgin Islands, with the intent of committing crimes against the plaintiff. Page 5 of 13. At age 13, specifically the plaintiff number 1 was stalked in the state of Missouri, drugged and trafficked to be sexually abused at an event at 9 East 71st Street, Manhattan, New York, 10021, by the conspiring defendants. At this piece of property owned by defendant number 1, plaintiff number 1 was sexually assaulted by various parties in attendance, specifically Harvey Weinstein and Sean Carter. The defendants number 2 and 3 willingly and forcibly raped plaintiff number 1 and committed lewd and sexual acts against and upon her without consent of any plaintiffs at the event held at the Manhattan property. The plaintiffs were repeatedly stalked, placed under unlawful surveillance, drugged, abducted, and trafficked for sexual assault, abuse, and exploitation at regular intervals over the course of the more than 20 years after the attack at the Manhattan townhouse owned by defendant number 1. Jeffrey Epstein, represented as defendant number 1, conspired with Harvey Weinstein and Sean Carter to initiate a system of stalking, surveilling, drugging, abducting, and trying to physically control, abuse, or financially exploit and extort the plaintiff number 1. This conspiracy was in revenge retaliation for selling a multi-million-dollar lawsuit out of court without plaintiff number 3's mother for Epstein's crime of sexually abusing plaintiff number 1 to several of her siblings aboard the Lolita Express private jet with the currently deregistered tail number of N908JE and on Pedophilia Island, the privately owned Little St. James Island, in the 1980s and early 1990s, after being entrusted with the unsupervised care of the children. The defendants' conspiracy to operate the criminal enterprise targeting the plaintiffs spanned the entire nation of the United States, anywhere the plaintiffs traveled or resided. The defendants' system of stalking, drugging, and trafficking involved a complex, sophisticated criminal network established among and in tandem with all of the defendants to traffic plaintiff number 1 for their abuse, exploitation, entertainment, and criminal intentions of racketeering, extortion, and sex crimes. Page 6 of 13. This complex network of the criminal enterprise targeting the plaintiff involved the defendants compensating the co-conspirators defendants for their crimes of stalking, drugging, abducting, and assaulting the plaintiff number 1 at the behest of defendants 1 through 3 through use of various business transactions, including but not limited to offering and or facilitating employment contracts, lucrative partnership contracts such as record deals, fashion industry ventures, and other assorted goods and services such as company perks like luxury cars, housing, real estate, gifts, and large sums of cash distinguished as record advances and other legitimate business deals for decades. The defendants engaged in intentional torturous interference, kidnapping and holding the offsprings of plaintiff number 3, specifically number 1, Hostage by routinely hiring defendants to stalk and illegally surveil the plaintiffs and interact with the plaintiff number one under the disguise of befriending her or having romantic or business interests in any of the plaintiffs so that they could use the false relationship to facilitate exploitation, hostage taking, and abuse targeting the aforementioned plaintiffs. This deception to commit torturous interference was done regularly to allow the defendants ease of accessing the plaintiff's private life and spaces when plaintiff number 3 began violently demanding that the defendants 1 through 3 immediately cease and desist their extensive harassment, stalking, and kidnapping campaigns against her and her family. Plaintiff number 3 was made aware of the defendant's activities by numerous witnesses who refused to participate in the criminal operations after being solicited for hire to partake in the criminal operations and receive very lucrative compensation packages, including large sums of cash and high-profile entertainment contracts, such as high-visibility marketing and promotion opportunities. When informed of the conspiracy targeting her and her minor children, the plaintiff number 3 did take numerous and repeated actions to demand the defendants cease and desist all illegal abuse and conduct. Page 7 of 13. The defendants 1 through 3, however, engaged in establishing a thorough network of criminal operatives to facilitate their enterprise of spying, stalking, unlawful surveillance, breaking and entering, torturous interference, numerous sexual assaults, sexual battery, financial exploitation, abusive physical abuse, emotional harm, psychological torture, sexual harassment, lewd conduct, kidnapping, human trafficking, and extreme abuses for decades, specifically targeting plaintiffs 1 and 3 and their offsprings rather than cease and desist their criminal enterprise. This criminal enterprise, orchestrated by the defendants, escalated beyond the sexual assaults, abuse, harassment, and emotional harm into intense and extensive financial exploitation of the plaintiffs 1 and 3 and their offsprings, Jane and John Doe plaintiffs. The defendants' repeated abduction and hostage taking of the children of plaintiff 2 and 3 caused them emotional harm and caused financial damages in the course of regaining possession of their children. Lucrative career contracts in professional sports, entertainment, and other industries were forfeited in exchange for or consequence of redressing the crimes targeting plaintiffs number 2 and 3, shared 6 biological children, including but not limited to plaintiff number 1. When the plaintiff could not be used for sex trafficking exploitation, the defendants exploited the plaintiff's economic prowess and unique abilities to pick stocks, predict business and market trends, create very lucrative trade secrets, create lucrative intellectual property, and develop very profitable business concepts and consumer products in a diverse array of industries. The defendants orchestrated a criminal enterprise valued at billions of dollars by the trafficking and economic exploitation of the plaintiffs, for which the trade secrets, thefts, and related business and intellectual property crimes played a significant role in profitability of the criminal enterprise, and such crimes are being addressed in separate actions in the appropriate jurisdictions. Page 8 of 13. The defendants began stalking and surveilling the plaintiff number 1 as a child to misappropriate trade secrets, intellectual property, and other businesses and creative works of the plaintiff over the course of at least 3 decades with no intention of stopping, despite repeatedly being demanded to by the plaintiff 1 and 3. This financial exploitation became very lucrative for the defendants, where hundreds of millions to billions of dollars have been collected, earned worldwide by the defendants through their decades of exploiting and the plaintiff's creative and intellectual abilities while under the intense or constant surveillance of the defendants, who used audio, visual, and conspiring to befriend, date the plaintiffs 1 and 3 strictly to collect the private information or trade secrets and intellectual property in the furtherance of the criminal enterprise, expanding beyond the described sex crimes. The plaintiff number 1 is seeking civil redress in a separate complaint and jurisdiction for the extensive trade secret infringement, economic espionage, economic terrorism, and assorted extreme financial exploitation and abuses committed by the defendants against the plaintiffs. Plaintiffs have only mentioned the defendant's worldwide abuse and unlawful use of trade secrets, intellectual property infringements, abuse of the plaintiff's 1 and 3 likeliness in the development and worldwide marketing of numerous high-profile singers, rappers, entertainers, and entertainment projects, including but not limited to musical albums, music videos, television shows, etc. and all. In this action to provide scope of the abuse endured when the defendants were unable to drug, abduct, kidnap the plaintiff number 1 for repeated drug sexual assaults or hold hostage for ransom by the defendant and their criminal enterprise. This action, captioned in the header, filed in the U.S. Southern District of New York, is specifically redressing the decades of sex crimes targeting the plaintiff and their offspring. Page 9 of 13. When the plaintiffs were able to prevent the drug abductions for sexual assault against the plaintiff as a minor child and well into her adulthood, the defendants 1 through 3 responded by engaging in extreme forms of harassment that they conspired with the other defendants to initiate or facilitate. This harassment includes but is not limited to the sexual assault, fetishes, sexual harassment, verbal abuse, psychological torture, harassment such as gaslighting, and paying defendants to collect sexual data or other sexual explicit content featuring the plaintiff 1 and 3 by emerging in sex acts that will be classified as sexual battery in various jurisdictions on hidden cameras. The harassment includes creating pedophilia, where the plaintiff number 1 and or DOE plaintiffs were recorded in various states of undress as minors in private spaces and when drugged and trafficked aboard the private jet owned by defendant number 1, as well as other spaces for sexual assault where plaintiffs number 1 and other DOE plaintiffs were being presented as child prostitutes to the clients for the defendants. Plaintiff number 1 submits this statement of the case to obtain justice, to disrupt the defendant's ongoing actions, to obstruct such justice while retaining and or generating profits collected from the abuse of the plaintiffs, as outlined above, as throughout the detailed former complaint, pending submission into the case records by deceiving all parties. Defendants attempting at hiding all involvement in the defendant's sophisticated scheme of operating a criminal enterprise of human trafficking and trade secrets theft has been ongoing for more than 30 years, and the ongoing criminal conduct indicates the defendant's spirited refusal to stop the contact and their interest in continuing to enjoy the lavish profits from the criminal enterprise that they report to the public and government as legitimate income, business operations, and or financial economic gains. Plaintiff reserves the right to transfer their action or complaint to alternate jurisdictions as necessary in the interest of justice, and amend the action to include the full correct names and identities. Page 10 of 13. And identities and additional plaintiffs, including children, grandchildren, assorted relatives, and associates of the plaintiffs, to add the defendants whose names, identities have been withheld or made unavailable at the time of this action and listed as DOE defendants at the time of the filing this statement. Prayer for relief. Prayer for relief. For these reasons, as outlined in paragraph 1 through 48, the plaintiffs are demanding pecuniary damages in the amount of $500 million in punitive or general damages in this action submitted in the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of New York. Plaintiffs demand court-ordered permanent cease and desist restraining orders be issued against all of the defendants to end any and all of the defendants' decade-long and continued criminal contact as outlined in this action, where the defendants have made a sociopathic decade-long scheme of human trafficking, criminal sexual assault, financial exploitation, psychological torture, harassment, sexual harassment into a criminal enterprise targeting the plaintiffs 1 and 2 by alleging the defendants 1 through 3 have and created a purchase agreement for and are maintaining ownership of plaintiff number 1 and plaintiff 2 and 3's other offspring, some of whom are still minors. Plaintiffs demand court-ordered permanent cease and desist with restraining orders issued against the defendants be extended to include all members of the plaintiff's families, including children, grandchildren, extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and the plaintiff's businesses, partners, clients, friends, and romantic partners such as spouse or unmarried lovers anywhere in the world, due to the defendants having shown a very specific interest and propensity for targeting with criminal intentions, including but not limited to of harassment, spying, stalking, torturous interference, financial exploitation, and criminal sexual intents to the people and businesses closely associated with the plaintiffs. Plaintiffs demand any and all fair and equitable relief as available to award by the court to redress the damages the plaintiffs sustained through the decades of trauma formed the exploitation, sex crimes, child abuse, sexual assault resulting in feticide, sexual harassment, financial abuse, economic damages, discrimination, child sex, human trafficking for profit, numerous and repeated drug, sexual assaults, sexual battery, torturous interference in relationships, both business and personal, unlawful surveillance, spying, gross invasion of privacy, cross-country stalking of minors, cross-country stalking of adults, psychological torture, repeated kidnapping, abductions, hostage taking, and emotional harm, etc., outlined in this civil action. Page 11 of 13, the plaintiffs sustained these damages that were caused intentionally or consequently from the numerous crimes and unlawful acts willfully committed against them by the defendants and the defendants' recklessness of wanton disregard for the law in perpetuating a lucrative criminal operation targeting the plaintiffs. Despite the plaintiffs' numerous and repeated demands for the defendants to cease and desist their extreme and egregious criminal misconduct, since at least 1988, the defendants' extreme conduct has continued in various forms throughout the year 2020, with little to no intention of the defendants' willingness to stop their criminal conduct without lawsuit or their arrest on criminal charges to totally disrupt or disband the global criminal enterprise they've erected over 3 decades. I declare under the penalty of perjury that above statements contained in this filing in the United States District Court in the Southern District of New York are true, and understand the penalty of any false statement. Signed in the country of Dallas, state of Texas, August 20th, 2020 at 3:10 p.m. Submitted respectfully, Charlene Y. Latham. So stay tuned for what's coming next on the subject, and subscribe now, tell your friends, and follow me everywhere. Thanks for stopping by.